Hello, hello. We are here for another Fireside Chat. I'm here, Sandro Mancuso. I'm here with Mash and José from Codurance. And as always, the idea for the Fireside Chat is just we have loads of conversations after working hours. We talk about many different topics, and we decided to start recording them. And we choose the topic just a few seconds before we start recording. And today, the topic that was chosen was delegating. And so, how we delegate. So, who would like to kick us off?
Well, I can kick us off. So, I think it's one thing that I found extremely difficult to do, and I still find it very, very difficult. And there's always been a case of getting your hands dirty. If you want to do something done, you know that old adage, if you want it done right, do it yourself. I think there's a level of arrogance and lack of skill in delegation in that, right? And we still talk about it, right? I've got to start working on the business rather than for the business as well, especially in where we are, the things that we need to do at a strategic level. Often we go right down towards the detail, and then the strategic aspects start suffering because you need a lot of space and time for that as well. So I would say I'm definitely not talking about this subject as an expert, but I hope to learn a lot more through this discussion than to provide any deep insights, let's say.
I don't think you're going to learn anything from me. Because, I find it delegating extremely difficult for the reasons that you mentioned. There is a bit of arrogance in there. We led our careers in a way, we achieved things, and all of a sudden, you are in charge of a team or an initiative, or in our cases here, we are all in charge of a company, and delegating some very important decisions that will have quite a big impact in a lot of things is not easy. We always feel that we can do things better, and choosing what to delegate is quite a difficult thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also struggle with it a bit because there's a few aspects to that, right? One is, what do we understand as delegating? Because a lot of the time, me included some time ago, I felt delegating was, a binary thing. You delegate, you forget about it, someone else takes care of it, or you're on it. But there's actually a whole spectrum, right? There are many ways to go about that, and what I find challenging is two things. One is choosing where in the spectrum I feel comfortable with, and two, the person is ready for, right? Like how much of that, let's call it autonomy or complete delegation do you want to have? And then there's another aspect, which is when things don't go well, and let's say you have to jump in or you need to help, how to make sure that is not seen as micromanagement or as disempowering or all of those things, because then you sort of like get two problems. No, you get the problem of things not being done to standard or whatever, and at the same time you're killing people's motivations and that kind of stuff, right? So that's why I find it's not so much finding what to delegate. If I could, I could delegate everything, right? But from that perspective, is more about finding that balance or that trade-off. I think that I find more challenging there.
Yeah, I mean, I read this 7 Habits of Highly Effective People a while back, about a year ago. And at the end of the book, there are questions and answers that are more recent. And they said to him, if you had to advise, someone asked, like, what would be your one advice? Or he's been managing his own company, his own consultancy. And what would you tell yourself, after all these experiences? And he said, well, find the right people to do a lot of the things that need to happen in my business and get out of their way. Right. So the author of Seven Habits of Highly Effective People was also finding it difficult to delegate, I think. But I think there are two elements: find the right people and get out of the way. But there is more to it as well, right? There is often you kind of think, well, you find the right person, and sometimes you kind of even blame them. You say, well, I'm going to tell you this needs to happen. And why don't you actually even more than that? Why don't you, as the supposed delegatee, understand exactly what needs to happen and then go ahead and make it happen, right? So we kind of pass that responsibility on to them as well. But some people can take that and move forward with it, others can't, right? So then how do you identify those? So there's a bunch of questions here, right? How do you identify someone who will just find their place, as it were, and the gaps and so on, and take their own initiative to actually start doing this, and the ones that actually need a much clearer kind of direction? And then, is direction enough? That's another question. Do we have to create an environment as well? And where does the whole kind of leadership and purpose and autonomy and all those things fit into that as well, right? And there's a lot of questions I have around this, and I think it'll be good to kind of start talking maybe about some aspects.
You should write the topics down so that we can kind of go through them,
because it's all popping up in my head, because all these questions are in my head, when I'm thinking about why am I doing so many things maybe that I shouldn't be doing and others that I should be doing.
Yeah. I like the way that Jose talked about delegation is a spectrum. It's not a binary thing. And I think this is why we struggle. At least I sometimes struggle with that, is we feel that we are delegating everything. Like, for example, it's either or. Either I delegate or I don't, but there is probably a combination of things. First of all, how much you delegate. And then Jose mentioned, and you mentioned just now, Mesh, as well, is when you say like hiring the right people in which aspects? Because like different roles need a wide spectrum of skills, right? And some people have some skills in certain areas and not in other areas. So you want to delegate, but is the person prepared? Does this person have the skills to do that job? And not only to do the job, because then it gets there are different skills levels as well. One is what you said, Mesh. Oh, if I give the direction, and assuming that the person has the skills, the person will be able to carry on that task or that responsibility. But it's way beyond than that, right? This is one spectrum of the delegation. The other delegation is like, I have this problem, or the person says, look, I know that you have problems in this area. I can take on those problems and resolve that for you. And that's a very different thing. And you were talking about the purpose and the mastery and also like dictating direction or not. I think that there are different types of people, different levels of delegation. Some people can just say, hey, those are the issues that we have in this area. Can you look after that for me? Others just say, look, this is the direction. That's what we need to solve. Can you make sure that this thing here gets done? You are a bit more prescriptive. And sometimes you say, like, within the thing that needs to do, take the subset of those tasks and get this done. So, and then you are preparing this person for a journey. And at some point, this person will know more, have more skills to take more and more responsibilities. But that is, it's not as simple as I delegate or I don't, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, there is so, you can, sometimes it depends on what level of granularity you go to in terms of the atomic thing that you are delegating, right? If you can get to a point where actually it's more work just to kind of piecemeal feed this kind of set of directions to somebody than to actually do it yourself. So you have to come up a bit. So the further down you go, the clearer the directive gets, right? the clearer you know what kind of skills that person needs for that particular task. Yeah. And the clearer it is to say, okay, what kind of control I need to relinquish, let's say, for want of a better word, to them for them to be able to perform that task. So it gets much clearer. But the problem is that it increases your work, and sometimes you might as well do it yourself. So then finding that point where the control that you can provide, the purpose or the direction that you can provide, and the other thing was the skills, the evaluation, I guess, that you have in your mind that they'll be able to do this job. At what point do you actually stop? At what level of granularity? And I think that's a very difficult part. And at some point, the whole idea of leadership kind of comes into this, right? I'm taking these 3 things from Turn the Ship Around, where he mentions that as the 3 things to get right in order to lead well. And I guess leadership and delegation are in some ways very, very much, let's say, 2 sides of the same coin even, right?
Yeah. Again, what I would start by saying that the same way that you want something done right, do it yourself. There's the other side of, if you want to go far, no, go together. If you're gonna go fast, go alone. No, so it's a bit like that. No, it also depends on the context, and I feel like a lot of times we don't set the context right either, right? So let's say, no, you have to find the right people to be able to delegate to. Well, sometimes those people, I don't know, are new to the company, right? They don't have all the context. They don't have, even if they had the skill set, no, even if you already filtered to make sure that they're there, and we can't expect someone completely new to the organization to suddenly just know what to do. They're going to require help. No. And also, if someone has been, let's say, used to or is coming from a context where they've been told what to do, or that I don't know, maybe it's a very political environment, or it's a very where you kind of like you need to be treading safely, not to step on anyone, and so on. They may be aware of that, so that also adds up to the thing. So I think a lot of the success comes from setting up that right context so that people can succeed, and based on the level of skill and so on, we can then start deciding how much autonomy, if you want to call it, you can provide on that delegation, which is, I think, what you were referring to also, Mash. The pillars for autonomy, direction, skill. When those 2 are working together, that's great. You can have a lot of autonomy. If it's not clear, then you always have something that is not going well. Either it's clear where we have to go, but there's no skill to be able to deliver at that the level you need, or you have the skill but you're not clear about how to go about it, or where to go, and then it suffers anyway. And I feel that's one of the areas that we don't necessarily pay a lot of attention, because a lot of times what we're looking to solve with the delegation is completely delegate, right? Like, I have this thing, I cannot take care of it. Like, I'm already trying to delegate at a point where the system is maxed out, let's say.
Overloaded.
Exactly. So anything else will just make it even worse, right? And that's also part of the story, And
yeah, but see, as I was thinking, quite a few things in here. I hope that I don't mud the waters too much, because there are a few points as you were both talking. One is that we always talk about delegation from the person delegating perspective. But for example, in order for me to delegate, one thing I was thinking as you were talking is, are there different types of things that we delegate? So for example, there are things you mentioned, Jose, like we are overloaded. We have loads of work, right? And like in our case, our company is more than 100 people, right? We cannot do all the jobs. But there are certain jobs when you delegate that is like, it's almost, I don't have a good terminology for that, but like I was thinking like you are offloading work. So there is a piece of work that you do that you just want someone to carry on doing because you don't have the bandwidth to do anymore. That is one type of delegation. But there are different types of delegation. The other one that I was thinking of is, example, as we were expanding our company, we wanted to create different areas of the business, right? So for example, marketing, or we changed how sales operate. We now have different functions. So some of those skills we don't have ourselves. So this was not work that we were doing before. And we also don't have the skills to do that either. But that work needs to be delegated by us to someone to do that. So that delegation is very different from someone taking part of my work or hiring someone that doesn't have the skills that I have to actually do something for me that I don't even understand very, very well. But in both cases, this is another thing that when you talk about delegation, because being the person delegating, you remain responsible for those things or accountable even for those things, right? And I wonder if that changes how we feel about delegation, because one is a bit more straightforward because you know the work and you can relate to the skills needed, while the other is more of a risk because you don't even understand the skills needed.
And it's also a bit of a humility kind of, take. Now there's a humbleness there around, I can't do it. I need someone else's help to do it.
Exactly. And Sandro said this is everything is true except the last thing you said, that it's easier to delegate if you know what you're doing. I find it easier to delegate when I don't know what I'm doing. Right?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Fair enough.
There is. So, for example, we look at marketing, right? We recently hired a head of marketing. We have kind of like opinions about marketing, but we don't really know what we're doing in there, right? But having someone there who is looking after that who's kind of telling us like, these are the things that need to happen, this is how it should happen, those kind of things. And we are then there to kind of more think about the impact of those, more start thinking about providing the right space and thinking about and the right investment, and thinking about what kind of return that we should be expecting from that, and allowing them to experiment, and certain experiments don't work, but also making sure that they are not creating really expensive experiments, that they are moving through those experiments, those feeling different aspects of what needs to be done, but keeping an eye on are we investing too much is the cost of failure too big, and that kind of stuff. So giving them, in that case, we have given them plenty of space because we are not really going down too much into the house of things, right? So that, I think that is easier than where we actually know what we are doing. And in those cases, you're gonna dive into the details so quickly, and then suddenly, in some cases, people, you may disempower the person that you are trying to help, basically, and that causes problems of its own.
Right. So I will add another aspect then, because I agree. Point taken. Because I agree with you. Like delegating when I don't have the skills myself is easier when there are things that I know.
There's only one thing to do. Right? Like
exactly. You cannot do yourself, right?
Or you gotta do it yourself. No,
it's fair enough. So it's point taken. But then there is another aspect that I was thinking is the impact or the risks of what is being delegated to someone else. So, for example, certain things that you delegate, even when they are not done how you would have done them, or if they don't go so well, the risk in that thing not being done or not being done well is not too big. But other things, when they're delegated, for example, José is a great example, right? José is heading Codurance Spain. there is no bigger responsibility for us to delegate, right? In a way. So, and we have, like, including Jose, he has his own team and stuff. So some of the people that we delegate to, they take very, very big responsibilities. They are making some significant decisions that will have an impact in our culture, in our image, in our financials. So, but there are other delegations that don't have the same kind of risk. So I think that the way that we relate to those things is also different, right?
I think it's a very good point. Yeah. So doesn't that then say, because I want to bring back the conversation to, like, what would then be the kind of skills of a delegator and the skills of a person being delegated to, right? So what are the things that you need to get right as a delegator to do it effectively? And let's look at it from first of all, from a high risk type, the things where, as you said, where where actually if you don't get it right, it could have a very significant impact on the business, let's say. So what would be so let's say, Jose, what did we do right to feel comfortable that we can delegate the management of Codurance Spain to Jose?
Well, in that case, it's funny because Jose is in a conversation, right? but like, for example, there are. I was actually thinking about that. I was even talking to Viviani and a friend of ours over the weekend about company structure and stuff. And there are certain positions that we end up delegating to people that we trust. So the trust is sometimes takes a precedence on the skills. It's not, of course, the skills is essential. You would not like hand a company or a department or a project of an important client to someone that doesn't have the competence to fulfill that responsibility. But the trust is really important for the things that are really dear to you, that you feel that are really risky, that will really impact you or the things that you care about. The trust aspect for me takes precedence. And so unless that you don't know anyone in that space that you can trust, then you go outside. But normally, that's why senior managements or boards are formed by people that know each other, because the trust is probably more important when the risks are higher, in my view.
Jose, do you have some? I have a thing to add around trust, but I'd like to give you a bit of space to talk.
Yeah, on the note on the trust aspect, I feel like trust is also something that you build, no, because it's bounded, no, like there are people that you know for a very long time, and maybe you trust them to do something, but not to do other thing, right? So other things. So I feel like that aspect definitely was sort of there, but it still needed to be built. And I remember at the beginning, one of the conversations that I had with Sandro is like, listen, we're trusting you, we're giving you, the benefit of the doubt, but you need to show that. No, you need to show that that's there. And then I remember another conversation we're saying, okay, no, it's like mission accomplished. No, so from that point of view, it definitely helps. No, to have already some sort of relationship. Is a lot more difficult to do something with someone you don't know or don't even have a connection with. No, but there's this complement of also the having the competence, no, to be able to do it. There is another aspect that I feel is quite intentional, and we did at the beginning, which was setting clear expectations, boundaries, understanding what were the things that were important, what things were as we call it in coaching, not like the ghost of the things that maybe are not from this relationship, but they've happened in the past and they are there. No, it's something that you don't want to repeat. So being aware of that, because if you're coming in you may not be aware of those. So setting, let's say, that context, of where the boundaries are, what kind of things are important, and being explicit about even how to go about resolving conflict and that kind of stuff, I think is essential. Again, it goes back to setting the context right. Is yes, you have the right person, but also you need to set them up for success. And I think that's something that from the beginning we took care of, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
And there's an aspect as well about communication and feedback and so on, and that constant communication, because you're going to make mistakes and you're going to, it's like everything. We're always learning and we're always trying to do things better, but you need that feedback in order to steer things and to mitigate risk, so that things don't become more than what, something that you can fix easily, with a couple of conversations can then turn into something bigger because you didn't have those conversations. And I feel those three aspects, setting the context, the trust, and the feedback are essential when it comes to something like delegating a risky decision. Because
it's funny actually, because I think we're almost coming up. Well, probably it's already in many different materials about delegation and so on. But we are kind of coming up from basic principles. Like trust is almost as the initial point where you're deciding to delegate, and it's almost the thing that keeps you away from getting too involved, right? To provide the autonomy, because that's what it's about, right? I trust to provide the autonomy to that person that they'll be able to fulfill the thing, right? And then you talked about providing the context, and this is something that we are trying to do more and more, which is like we're working a lot on the strategy and trying to refine it and so on, because strategy is the context in a way, right? It's almost creating a framework for decisions to be made so that they're aligned, without the delegatee always having to go back to the person delegating to say, okay, I have this decision to make. How do I make it? The strategy should make that clear, right? And then with it, we are trying to come up with the goals, the objectives, and something that we need to still do better is the key results, right? It's because once you have those objectives and the key results, you can start then really thinking about feedback, right? Because otherwise, what do you give feedback on? You have to have some measurable or some visibility points, I don't know what you want to call it, right? Where you can get the feedback, understand where things are, or rather understand where things are, and then provide the feedback on whether you, from a delegator's point of view, it is being done according to those expectations, right? And I guess expectation setting is part of it, but expectations, in my view, is a bit too vague a term, I think, and kind of taking it down more towards objectives and key results maybe a bit better.
So there is a context, but I was still now thinking about the other side. So when we delegate, I was talking about the two different types of delegation, right? So there is, something that are more risky. So, probably there is even more now that I'm thinking. So there are things that are delegated because that person was hired to do that job, right? So you delegate because that is their job to do certain things. There was a decision that we're going to structure the team, the company, the department, or whatever in a specific way, and we will have different people doing certain things. So of course that the responsibility or certain responsibilities are delegated to someone because it's part of their job. They were hired to resolve some of those problems. So, but there is still like a degree of delegation. It's not that they're, as soon as day one, as they arrive, they're gonna now do whatever they want in that space. That there is a gradual degree of delegation and sense of trust and stuff. But I was thinking on another type of delegation from the is that a word? Delegatee or the person that is being delegated to?
Let's make it up. Let's say delegatee is a word.
Delegatee.
But I think it's actually called delegate. But it sounds a bit awkward. Yeah, the delegate is the delegatee.
Isn't delegate someone that attends a conference or an event?
Maybe. Maybe.
Anyway, I'm gonna
Let's
use
stick with
delegatee. Delegatee, right? So I love English that you can just make up words, right? So so there is a responsibility on the other side as well, because everyone wants to be empowered. Everyone say, yeah, of course, I want to have autonomy. In fact, everyone wants to have autonomy, but they also need to show that they deserve that autonomy, because it's not only the person that someone needs to delegate. They should feel comfortable to delegate. And how do you make someone comfortable to delegate stuff to you? You show to the person that you want to give you that responsibility, you want to make that person comfortable that you are capable to get that responsibility. But then there are two sides. Exactly. So exactly, because you cannot just blame someone that is bad at delegating. Oh, my boss doesn't delegate stuff to me. Yeah, but like, what am I doing to show to my boss that she can trust me with that responsibility, right? So then there is an element of, I was thinking about, that is the capability. That is one element. So do I have the capabilities, or at least am I perceived to have the capabilities or the skills, so that that person can delegate things for me? Because it's different, like me thinking that I have the skills and being perceived as someone that has the skills by the other person, right? Those are different things. Then there is the type of personal relationship, mainly for critical responsibilities, because we know that that's a much difficult thing to delegate when the impact is big. So as you were saying, Jose, like when you delegate something that is quite risky or quite important, and we know that things are not going to go so well, or we would do things in different ways, we need to be comfortable to have difficult conversations. So choosing the person that you are delegating to, or you as a delegatee, you need to make sure that you have that behavior, that you would be happy to have difficult conversations without creating a big problem. And then, I think this is the aspect that I wanted to say. So there is a personal relationship, there is the having difficult conversations, but you also remember commitment, because there are certain people that I get along. I know that they are capable, but I may not feel that they are committed, or they have that strong work ethics. This is also part of giving that impression for delegation, because like, if I'm not very committed and dedicated to certain things, someone will be less likely to delegate important things to me.
I think actually the word that comes to my mind is attitude, because when you were talking about skills is one thing. Skill is the ability to, to do the things that need to be done, right? It's just the ability, right? And when you start talking about commitment and the relationship, or even some trust aspect, to me, like if we distill that to attitude, is how does that person behave? What is their attitude? Because they, like commitment is I think maybe a bit stronger word, because what you're really looking for is someone to be effective at doing if you think they have the skill, then you're thinking, well, they need to have the right attitude to be able to do that job, right? And when they take that on, that that they will do everything in their power to get it done. And to me, that kind of boils down towards an attitude type
Attitude
thing.
is a better word, Mesh. I was struggling to articulate what I wanted, but I agree with you. Attitude is the right word for what I was trying to describe.
Yeah, and this is where delegating is a very good tool for developing people as well, right? Like if you have the right attitude, but maybe not the necessarily the skills or the exposure to the context and so on, I feel like that's a great way of doing that. It will take time, because if you're building someone up, it will require, for them to gain the skill. You can't expect it to happen immediately, no, unless they're kind of gifted in that regard, no. but you also need to be very careful that not to set certain expectations that cannot be met, or that let's say go beyond the rate at which the person can improve. Yeah, just am I making sense there? Is like, if you're delegating, you want to, if you're building up someone's skills through delegation, right? And there is a way to go. It's not like they already have the skills, right? And it's just about getting a bit of exposure and experience. You need to know that you're in for a journey, right? And that at each stage of the journey, people are gonna need different things, right? Like they're gonna at the beginning, maybe they need to be a bit any more. They're gonna need a bit more help, or for you to be more prescriptive, and then from there on, start setting certain things for them to do whichever way they want, and then maybe get some feedback on that, and eventually you can move all the way to the other side of the spectrum, where people have already the skills, they have the direction and so on, and you can just relax on that sense. No, and this is important because feedback here is a key aspect of that. No, and good feedback especially is a key aspect of that, because it's a person that is learning, and so encouraging, being encouraging is also an important aspect. It's not just about what's not working well. It's feeding the attitude, otherwise you can kill the attitude really quickly. No, and that's really important. And the other thing is how to, because you still want certain results, right? So it goes back to picking the right level of risk, for that delegation and so on. And if the expectations, let's say, are that things will get done at a certain level, if for whatever reason you have to jump in, how do you make sure that that is not seen as the complete opposite? Mm-hmm. Is what I was trying to say before. Mm-hmm. Not like that you're jumping in, we only have a couple of hours to do that presentation, is not ready, and then suddenly you throw out the door maybe everything that the person has gone through, and then it suddenly is like, then what is this? No, and it just goes against everything that you're trying to build. And it's really easy to do, like, especially if you know what so you know what you're doing. It's very easy to let yourself go, and just jump in. You're trying to help, because in the end you're not doing this from, I want to squash this person's
but I think that
whatever. You're trying to get results, but it is getting the opposite.
But then this is what you were describing is a different type of delegation, because like we talked about, I actually would like to go back, like once this is recorded, I'll probably go back and list the different types of delegation that we mentioned in stuff, because like we talked about delegating risky activities. We talked about when we delegate just to offload work. We talked about delegating for things that we don't even know how to do. We talk about the risks of those things, but the delegation that you just mentioned now is different from everything we told you. I don't have a name for that, but it's almost like strategically you are delegating to someone because the intention of the delegation is to build that person up. It starts to preparing the next layer of people in your organization, the next layer of leaders and things like that. So you are deliberately choosing what to delegate to whom, so that you help them to grow into certain positions and stuff. And then, of course, the expectation of the delegation is very, very different, right? So this is for me what was very interesting when you were saying, like, there are different types of delegations, and the expectation that we have is completely different as well, right? We'll be far more tolerant to describe.
There is an element of mentoring to it as well, right? It's like, they in fact, I personally think if you had to look at a growing organization, and an organization that really, the most important form of delegation, I would say, is this, which actually combines this mentoring aspect, especially if you are trying to almost you want to delegate to the point where you yourself become almost redundant, right? And if that's where you want to get to, then what you are trying to have is people that actually show the all the hallmarks of being doing what you do at, or at least some aspects of it, and actually surpassing that, right? And there is a kind of a mentoring element to this, isn't it? Is that you, like, they often say, you hire for attitude and teach the skill, right? You may not even be able to teach the skill yourself, but you are still mentoring in the sense that you're always providing them with that kind of stretch goal, and for them to get there, and and providing them with a safe environment, and mentoring them in terms of how to fail fast, fail early, and how to experiment, and how to kind of move forward, providing value as you are learning, and and for them to become the, let's say, the to kind of have all the capability that they need to have to fulfill a particular function that you want to delegate.
I'd like to expand on the attitude side, because like we talked a lot about delegating, what would make the person delegating more comfortable, the different types of delegation. But like as a person, let's say, if I think back following my career, so I wanted more things, right? I wanted more responsibilities. We covered that in a different Fireside Chat on careers. But what kind of attitude that we are talking about? So, for example, what attitude that we would make us want to delegate something to someone, or make the person more, how can I say, increase the chances of someone delegating stuff to you, right? So
I would personally, I mean, I think attitude is almost like a catch-all for, sometimes we call them soft skills, sometimes we call them communication and people skills and all these kind of stuff. But to me, attitude is related to, like, this person doesn't have the, let's say, the technical know-how. I mean technical in the broader sense, they don't have the, maybe some of the skills needed and so on, but they have other skills that will make a person that needs to perform that role effective. Some things are quite universal, like being able to speak well, being effective, being focused, managing your own time. These kind of things are almost universal, right? And other things may be more related to that job. There might be facilitation aspects needed. There might be kind of leadership aspects needed, which, and so I think it's more about these, so-called softer skills that you are looking for, that you think would be absolutely necessary, and we all know are very difficult to teach. And some of the more technical or context-specific skills that you think that you can pass on, right? So to me, when we say attitude, actually what we're saying is, they have these universal kind of soft skills that make a person effective in any role, really.
I second that, and I would say that it's also about showing certain behaviors, like being able to face a challenge and not get discouraged, or showing courage, basically, and being able to say, okay, I don't know this, but I can learn it, right? And I can and put in the effort into doing that, instead of just seeing a blocker and just just so for me, that's very, very important. It supersedes the skill aspect of it, because the reality is, for a lot of the stuff, at least in well, I would say in general, a lot of the stuff that we do, both technically and not technically, you don't always have like one answer, and this is the correct answer. This is not a math problem, right? Where there you go, this is the result, and there you go. There are many ways of doing things. A lot of those involve trade-offs. A lot of those, you may not know enough information or may not have the knowledge about the technology or whatever, right? And being able to see the problem, break it down, and tackle each thing, and just overcoming this thing and adapting is essential for me, and that fills me with trust and so on, right? Even if things don't go well, I feel like in that case, that's fine, right? Because again, we did everything we could and so on, right? Like there is this aspect, right? And showing those behaviors, and those behaviors you don't just show in one thing, or writing code or whatever. Like this is something that you can show anytime when you're in a team, taking a step forward and saying, hey, I'll take care of this, and I don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna step in and try to. For me, that's a clear indicator of a really good attitude, and that makes me want to try that delegation and try that aspect. Because as you were saying, that part I cannot provide. I can provide the skill. I can provide the the development or the experience for continuing, but that is just the person, and it's really hard.
Yeah, I agree with what you both said, but there is for me a few other things as well. And this goes back to the kind of responsibility that is being delegated. So the more critical those responsibilities are, the more is needed from the person, the delegatee, to build that trust to get that responsibility. So although we used attitude as a word that was more encompassed, that it was a better word for that part of the conversation, the commitment here now is probably more specific, more narrow, but it's exactly what I want to say. Because, for example, when you are delegating something that is really, really important, there is everything else you said, but there's also an element of, we know that person is committed.
The outcome.
Exactly. They own it.
And you do care about the outcome, and it's not just, it's okay to fail or whatever, right? Yeah. Yes, I understand. Yeah.
And they have that, like, for example, if they need to put extra effort, they will put an extra effort. They understand the kind of responsibility that now they hold. And they showed in numerous occasions, maybe with less responsibility in other areas, but they've been showing that every time that they had a responsibility, they owned it. They had that sense of extreme ownership and said, like, look, if I need you to go the extra mile, if I need you to do it, they can adjust their time. I'm not talking about, I don't want you to give the wrong impression that we are expecting people to work like 100 hours per week. It's not what I'm saying. But they should know when it's important to, like, you know what, I need to get this shit done. And like, this is my responsibility. I understand how important this is. I can compensate later on. I can manage my time later, but they have this very strong sense of ownership. And even when they get sick and stuff, they have a phone call. They figure out a way, but they own it. Right?
So there is a one side of commitment that is actually related to the delegatee or delegate, right? It's that there is almost like it's a personality trait, but it's also a sense of professionalism that they are here to do this job, and people are relying on them and they need to do it, right? And people are relying on them is actually kind of segues into the other part, which is actually in some ways the responsibility of the person delegating to create the environment where commitment will flourish, right? And this then goes back to purpose, right? There are in certain environments and certain conditions that commitment is easy. So of course, if somebody is not professional, everything else is moot, right? They need to have that. But even people who have a professional attitude could lack commitment if on the other end that purpose is lacking, right? So I think it's kind of a two-way thing, isn't it? We, as person who is delegating, they need to create that environment but the person being delegated to need to have that sense of professionalism to kind of to say, the environment is right for me, and I need to do my part for that, right?
So do you have any good or bad experiences that you sort of like, if I could do this again, I probably would do it very differently?
I'm going on mute.
Thanks, Mash, for putting me on spot like that, and crossing your arms, like, yeah, deal with that. So it depends of, like, well, first of all, we are still doing it, right? That's another thing. So we're not done yet, right? So we are continuously doing that, and even now, the amount of delegation that we are making, and the type of delegation that we're making, is just becoming worse. We are delegating more and more critical things as the company grows. I think that I now understand a little bit better what makes me comfortable to delegate and what doesn't, in terms of the attitude of people, the risk involved. I don't think that I had that very clear before. I'm not saying that I do well or I have it clear today, but I certainly have clearer and a better understanding today than I had when we started almost 8 years ago. For key positions today, I normally look for people that I normally have worked with, what I know. I like their work ethics. I like their commitment. I also analyze what kind of personal relationship can I have with this person, even when the person is not very close. But I say, like, this is a person that I can have a very open conversation. Can we sit down and really talk about shit, right? So as they are, because this is the kind of people that you need. We need that trust, that how can I say? I need to be comfortable to have those conversations. So to delegate some critical things, and then of course the skills will come along. But so those are things that are clearer to me now.
I think from my point of view, I wouldn't like to name names of positions, but there are many places we got delegation wrong as we moved on, especially in areas where, almost areas that we knew what to do, or we have had experience of that. And there have been many instances where we've gone down to the level where we've effectively disempowered the person, right? So there's, to answer your question, there have been many areas where I could go back and say, you know what, it would have been better if we just held off, but also if we trained the person or set the right expectations, ask them to kind of have had a much tighter feedback loop and be a bit more frank in our conversations in terms of what we are trying to achieve. Yeah, I think this often always has a problem. We've been not been great at setting clear expectations, not setting clear goals, right? What those key results are and those kind of things. We've not been great at that. And when those things don't happen, we also do the British thing and beat around the bush a bit. But because those clear goals were not set in the beginning, it makes the conversation quite awkward as well, right? We had these ideas in mind, you had this idea in mind, but now I think you're not achieving that. So I'm kind of feeling a bit awkward to tell you that or criticize that or kind of, and it even feels like it's you're being unfair, right? So there are has been, and I think we are trying to do that a bit more, where we are being a bit more clear in our expectations, in the strategy we want to follow, in the things we want to achieve. We've got a long way to go there. In terms of delegating well, I think I would just echo Sandro's, where we have known people where, like yourself, for example, where we've been kind of, it's almost like we've been with them and we have this very clear idea of their capabilities and their weak points and so on, and we know exactly where to let them, to just forget about it, and where to kind of handhold and to even walk along them, because we have been with them for so long before. We have that pre-existing relationship. In those cases, things have worked better, let's say. Although that's not always the case, because now we are getting to the point where we've hired certain people. In fact, some people we've hired into the position that we were going to hire, and they've done well. In other cases, we've had people come from the very towards the bottom of the company in terms of the role that they're performing, going all the way into senior management because of the attitude and the impact that they were having. That also is another way of they establish that trust, in the ways of working. And in those cases as well, I think we have delegated well. And there is another one where we have, like, for example, in our financial control type thing, where we struggle to delegate properly. But actually, this is another kind of delegation which was actually staring us in the face, because this is such a commoditized place in a way, and hiring just the right skill and qualification solved that problem. Because before, we were too small organization, and we were looking for kind of a person who is a bit more generic and can do many different things, and hiring someone who a bit more specialized in that area that really need to happen. This is that also worked really well, allowed us to step back, because there's a lot of elements in there where you just want the right kind of things to happen, but they were not happening because we just did not hire the right level of skill, which actually goes against quite a few of our conversations we were having. But in this case, there was a commoditized skill that we needed, a specialized skill, and putting that skill in that place actually allowed us to delegate more effectively.
Can I just add, because as you were thinking, I was remembering more cases. I know that you mentioned the advice on the 7 habits of an effective leader or person. I forgot the name of the book, right?
People, yeah, 7 habits of highly effective people. I think it's author is called Stephen Covey.
Yeah, it's in my to read list. I think I'm not a believer where it goes against that just hire. That we people say, like, oh, hire a bunch of smart people, put them together, and things will happen. I'm not a believer of that. We made this mistake a few times, not at the senior management level, but a lot of in project level, in the early days, in the early years, right? So, for example, we would put some people that we felt, they're good professionals and stuff. We put them in a project, and they were each one pushing a completely different direction, and they were not able to concentrate. So what I learned, at least in a project environment, because those are the examples that are a bit fresher in my mind, certain projects that we had, they had structure. They had like some people doing engagement or more than one team, and then there are people doing some specific things and another team doing something else. So there were different people in different positions, but it was not very clear who should do what. There was not a lot of guidance, so everyone was pushing in a direction. I think that when we delegate, we need also to provide the direction, but also establish boundaries. And this is also more related to what you were saying, the type of delegation that you were saying, Jose, is more a supervised delegation, right? So there is a job, like a work with a client that we need to do. There are different things that needs to be done. So you don't trust people to do whatever they want in that project. And we made this mistake many, many, many years ago, and more than once. So nowadays, for example, it led us to structure our projects better. So now we have more well-defined roles, and we also had, even in our larger projects, I remember we had conversations not long ago, but in the early days of the project, like, what are the different levels of responsibility? What are the different boundaries for autonomy? So, for example, we had to have conversations with teams, team leads, client leads and stuff, and say, look, in these boundaries here, you have full autonomy. But if you want to do things that impact other things, here you need to ask authorization, right? So this is outside their boundary. There are some overlaps on those boundaries, but we had to have a structure. So this is a thing that I would do differently today. I'm not a believer, put a bunch of smart people that we like, and things are going to happen. I didn't have very good experiences doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. By the way, I think the advice from Stephen Covey probably is kind of it simplifies things, but I don't think he meant that, just put a bunch of smart people together, more like people who can do something. And so, and I don't think he was talking in context of teams as well to some way. But yeah, I completely agree with it that, you can't have, without coordinate, you can't have a bunch of talented people in the team, but there are no sense of responsibility or roles or where one starts and the other ends. And also there are so many things that need to be done. Of course, the goal can be shared by the team, but there are many responsibilities, many things that happen within the context of that team. And even when the goal is shared, but people are not clear on who is doing what, it still is a shambles, right? And I totally agree that, you need to create that almost a framework where people can operate well within the team, knowing who's doing what, that kind of thing.
So for me, I was, as you were talking, I was thinking back to some of the experiences that I had that were not that great. And there is again, a double-edged sword kind of thing with the personal relationship aspect, because it may cloud your judgment into both, the skill level for someone and also doing a proper assessment of and providing the feedback and so on. And I've been, bit by that in the past, where again, there was a good relationship and so on, but it didn't, because of the personal relationship, it was very hard to not be tainted by that when looking at the thing objectively, right? And everything takes longer, everything, like until you get to that point where you would normally get with someone maybe you have a bit less of a history with, or something like that. And I feel that's also an aspect. Now it helps that collaboration, the trust aspect and the relationship helps definitely, right? And makes it easier in that regard, at least for the person delegating, but then again, some of those things may not be transferable to the professional side of things, and now you're mixing things, because how is that going to affect maybe your personal relationship outside of work, or that kind of stuff. So I feel that's also an aspect to be careful about. That relationship is, you need to be, or at least try to be objective or conscious of the bias that you may have or introduce by doing that,
and introduce baggage almost into
as well yeah, it's you bring everything in, right? Like it's not like you compartmentalize neatly, this is work, this is not, and again, I like to have friends and so on that I would definitely work with. But some people are great for going for a barbecue and having a few beers, or throwing a party, and not so great for working with. Or so it is part of the thing. No, you need to also take that into account. No.
Yeah. It's funny because this is almost like an internal joke here, because I say, like, I would trust my parents and my wife with my own life and the life of my kids, but I would not trust them to run our business, right? So I mean, like, keeping them very safe, like, you trust people with your life, but but there are other things that I wouldn't. So you need to keep that
trust, isn't it?
Exactly, completely separate. And but in a friendship, I had a lot of cases like that. There are a lot of people that I like a lot. They are friends. They are in the same industry, but it's better that we keep things separately and we just meet during barbecues and things like that. Okay, so we reached just over an hour, so maybe we should call it a day.
Yeah, I think so. I think
good.
So.
Cool. Yeah. So, for people watching, as always, if you like this video, if you like the conversation, give it a thumbs up, register in the channel, and leave in the comments if you want us to address a topic. The idea is exactly like that. It's to be unstructured. We pick a topic, we have a conversation about it, and so just leave a comment. and I see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.